The mafia makes millions of dollars every single day. And even though we've heard about them doing illegal things like gambling, loan sharking, and extortion, most of their money comes from legit businesses. The tricky part for law enforcement is that because these are legitimate businesses, there's no obvious sign that they have mob ties. But there are some common ways that mafias launder the money they make from these businesses. So here are 6 of the most common ways the mafia launders millions through legit businesses. Number 1. Casinos. It's almost common knowledge at this point that organized crime groups make huge amounts of money through casinos. The reality is that it's very easy to skim money off the top when you're rerunning a casino. A lot of people gamble in casinos without keeping track of what they win or lose. So it is not hard to keep a few extra bucks here or there for yourself without being noticed. Furthermore, the hazy nature of gambling means that if you lose a bunch of money at a casino, you can just chalk it up to a bad beat rather than theft. This is why many casinos are owned by the mafia. In fact, the largest mafia families in the United States got their start through illegal gambling dens. While gambling was outlawed in the US, the mafia saw an opportunity to make lots of money. So they started running illegal lotteries, poker games, and sports betting rings. This was extremely profitable for the families. And once they made enough money, they used it to get into legitimate businesses like restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. These businesses would then become fronts for their illegal operations, allowing them to launder their money and avoid detection from law enforcement. One of the biggest examples of this is the Genovese crime family. This group was founded in 1937 after a violent turf war between rival gangs. They quickly became one of the most powerful families in the mafia, and they held this position for decades. A big reason for this was that they were early adopters when it came to gambling. They set up illegal lotteries, race fixing, and sports betting in the 1940s. And they used the money they made to establish legitimate businesses like nightclubs and restaurants. These businesses allowed them to move their dirty money and stay under the radar. By the 1950s, they had become so powerful that they were able to buy legal casinos in Las Vegas. The most famous example of this was the Stardust Resort and Casino. The Genovese family bought the Stardust in 1956. At the time, they didn't have enough money to buy it outright, so they paid $2 million down and promised to pay the rest over the next few years. However, they never ended up paying the full purchase price, and the casino was raided multiple times due to their illegal activities. Despite this, the family profited hugely from the venture, and they continued buying casinos in Vegas throughout the 60s. Moving on at number 2, trash collection. You might be surprised to hear that trash collection is one of the most lucrative industries out there. In fact, the largest trash collection companies in the US do billions of dollars worth of business each year. With numbers like that, it's no surprise that the mafia has gotten in on the action. The truth is that collecting garbage is a perfect front for a bunch of criminal activity. For starters, people don't really care who's collecting their trash as long as it gets done. This means that the mafia can operate with very little oversight. Additionally, most garbage collectors work alone. This makes it easy for them to collect money and goods without raising any suspicion. It also makes it easier for them to intimidate other criminals and business owners who get in their way. Probably the most infamous mafia-run trash collection company is the Colombo crime family's automated waste collection. This New York-based company was founded in 1981, and it quickly became one of the most successful waste management companies in the country. At its peak in the late 80s, the company did $30 million worth of business every year. However, the family's control over the company became obvious after several mobsters were arrested for extortion. After this, the company was raided, and investigators found that most of their financial records were missing. Eventually, the company was shut down, and the family lost their lucrative source of income. Next up, at No. 3, construction. Construction is another industry where it's possible to make millions of dollars, and it's also another industry that's rife with opportunities to launder money. The reality is that the construction industry is largely unregulated, and there's a lot of room for fraud. This means that mobsters can easily hide their ill-gotten gains in construction projects without drawing attention to themselves. All they have to do is inflate the cost of materials or labor and then pocket the difference. Luckily for them, the construction industry is already full of shady contractors and middlemen, so it's not hard to blend in. The Bonanno crime family is a great example of a mafia family that profited greatly from the construction industry. They gained notoriety in the 1960s, when they started demanding payment from contractors working on public projects. They also started skimming money from union pension funds. This allowed them to fund a bunch of construction projects around New York City. For example, the family made millions of dollars by skimming money from Local 28 of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. They used this money to fund a cement company called Brooklyn Concrete Corp. That supplied concrete for many construction sites in New York. This allowed them to launder their money and fund their other criminal activities. Coming up at No. 4, trucking, similar to construction. The trucking industry is another one that's been infiltrated by the mafia. There are a few reasons for this, but the main one is that it's relatively easy to launder money through a trucking company. For example, truckers often have to travel long distances. This makes it easy for them to transport goods without anyone noticing. They also don't have to provide a detailed accounting of their expenses, which means that they can easily hide their profits. Perhaps the most famous example of a mafia trucking company is the Genovese crime family's International Brotherhood of Teamsters Local 57. This family was founded in the 1930s, and it quickly became one of the most powerful unions in the country. They gained this power by controlling the Teamsters Central Conference, which gave them jurisdiction over all Teamsters locals in New York City. This meant that they had control over thousands of truck drivers. They used this power to extort money from businesses, and they also skimmed money from union dues. The family used this money to fund a bunch of different criminal activities, including illegal gambling and narcotics trafficking. At No. 5, we have restaurants and bars. Restaurants and bars are one of the oldest mafia fronts in existence. As far back as the early 1900s, Italian-American gangs were running illegal gambling and drinking establishments. These businesses provided the perfect opportunity to launder money because they dealt in cash, and there was very little oversight. This meant that the mafia could easily hide their profits from the government. On top of that, restaurants and bars are a great place to meet people and exchange information. This made it easy for the mafia to stay in touch with their associates. While laundering their money, it wasn't until the 1970s that authorities started cracking down on mafia-owned restaurants and bars. But by that time, the mafia had already diversified their holdings. Even though they no longer owned as much of the restaurants and bars as they used to, they still owned some, and they still used them as fronts for their criminal activities. Finally, at No. 6, unions. Labor unions have been a major player in organized crime since the early days of the mafia. The reality is that unions provide the perfect environment for mobsters to thrive. For starters, unions are full of people who are willing to break the rules. This is because many union members are desperate for work, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep their jobs. Mobsters can take advantage of this desperation by pressuring union officials to hire certain people. They can also use violence to intimidate union members into doing what they want. Probably the most notorious example of a mafia-run union is the Genovese crime family's control of local LTO 100 of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. The family's control over the union dates back to the 1950s. During this time, they used their influence to extort money from businesses and to rig union elections. They also used union funds to support their other criminal activities. Things got so bad that the government eventually stepped in and took control of the union. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.